Hello and welcome to SketchQuest. We here at TYG have collected some of the most talented artists within our reach to create this series as we work towards improving our artistic skills. Come join us and begin your journey today. Your legend starts here. But before we can paint for the gods, it's time to start with some basics. And don't worry if you're only just starting out, because I'll be learning alongside you. And remember, if you want to share your creations with us, use the hashtag SketchQuest. Let's see what today's quest is, shall we? Today's quest giver is none other than illustrator and VTuber artist extraordinaire J.L.P. Hello and welcome to SketchQuest. How are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. Hi, I'm good, thank you.
We're going to be doing some basics this week and you're taking the helm. Thank you for being the first of our SketchQuest conductors.
Yeah, I'm so excited to be here.
No pressure. I'm actually showing off one of your artworks that you did for me. I think this was one of your first commissions as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, this was my first book cover commission and I really loved working on this one.
Yeah. It's Gallifrey and Elsa Frey from my books. I love them. So what's the quest that you're going to be giving us today?
Today's quest, we're going to be working on the basics of brushes in Procreate and Clip Studio Paint.
Ooh.
Yeah, I feel like when a lot of beginners start in their softwares, they get a bit nervous because they don't know which brushes they should be using. So today I'm just going to be showing you a few tips on how to improve your brushwork.
That's amazing because I just installed Clip Studio fresh on my new PC and I have no brushes, so yay.
Well, we're just going to be using the basics today, so hopefully you should be able to find them. So starting it off, I'm going to be showing you how to do your brushes on Photoshop.
Mm-hmm.
So on Photoshop, our brushes look a little different to Clip Studio Paint, but I will go over Clip Studio Paint as well. So one of the main things people get so scared about with Photoshop is how complex it looks. But it can be quite easy when you know what you're doing.
There's so many tabs.
Yeah, it looks like a lot, but here is basically the main brush menu for Photoshop. And it looks really scary, but I promise it's not. So at the top here, we've got our main brush settings, and they can usually be found at the top left-hand corner of Photoshop. So on here, you've got how to select your brushes. And this one is to how to size your brushes. And this one is very complex detail of brushes, but I'm just going to be teaching you the basics for today. So when you open up your brush menu, it might look like this, which looks really scary, but do not worry. The main things you need to worry about is right here, the size of the brush. Right here is the brush that you've selected and any history of any brushes that you've selected. And here is folders that you can put your brushes in, but don't worry about that for today. So this is the really scary folder, and this is your brush settings. I mean, it looks terrifying. And you can do a lot with your brushes using these things here, but for today, I don't think we need to look into that. The main thing you need to worry about is the brush that you have selected, which will be here at the top, and it should be in a blue square so you know which one you have selected. And here you can change the size of the brush by making it bigger this way or smaller this way. And the other thing I'd say is you need to know the hardness of the brush. So the hardness of the brush impacts how strong the brush is and how solid it looks. So here, another few tips I would suggest is learning about brush opacity and brush flow. So the opacity is how transparent the brush actually is, or opaque. The 100% opacity basically means that our brush is really solid like this, so you can't see through it at all. However, if we change the opacity down, we can see that the brush kind of becomes a bit more transparent compared to when it was 100%. The reason why this can be really helpful is sometimes when you're shading or rendering, you'll want to be using a lower opacity of the brush, but we can get into that on another lesson. So I know that looked a little scary for Photoshop, so I'm going to show you how to do it in Clip Studio Paint, which is a little easier, and I would recommend Clip Studio Paint for beginners personally. So you should be able to follow along with this one too, Mashi.
Yeah, I love Clip Studio. That's what I use.
Great. The brushes here in Clip Studio Paint should look like this. You should have a subtool, and they should be listed under the pens. I think they also have do you have like a soft brushes and things like that? But the main one I'm going to be looking at right now is the pen one. Yeah. So the first pen I'd really suggest looking at is the G pen. Personally, I think a lot of people use this one for quite a lot of different things, and it's a very easy brush to use. I would say this is equivalent to like the hard brush in Photoshop. Yeah, this one.
Yeah.
So that's how you would select your pens in Clip Studio Paint. And this looks a bit scary as well. This is pretty much the equivalent to the scary bit of Photoshop. However, it looks a little easier to work out, but it's just the same thing. Right here, we've got the brush size. The more you take it up here, the bigger the brush size is. And the lower you put it, the smaller the brush size is. And again, we have opacity, which is a super handy tool to use when doing with rendering, shading, things like that. Again, 100% is full opacity where the brush is really solid. And then you can always lower that as well and have fun with just messing around with the opacity. Anti-analyzing is a very interesting thing that is in Clip Studio Paint that I would recommend you just are aware of in case you ever like mess up with your brushes. So this is what I would call like the strength of your brush. Ideally, it should be set to about here. However, if you're interested in doing like pixel art, you can set it to the lower pixel here. And if you want to render pieces with like high rendering, you can also set it to the high setting here. So yeah.
The anti-aliasing. Yes.
Yeah. I would say one of the best things about Clip Studio Paint is that it has the brush size and it looks like this, so it's really easy to just click and select whatever size you need instead of messing around with the sliders. It's super handy. So if you can have that out, yeah, definitely use it.
I'm just like bloop, big, bloop, bigger.
Yeah. So I'm going to be teaching you about what I would consider the two really important brush types to know in any digital software. And in Photoshop, they're known as the hard round brush and the airbrush. But the equivalent to that in Clip Studio Paint is the G pen or the soft brush. So I would suggest brushes can be so fancy and make your art look really unique, but most artists only tend to use these two brushes. They're like the most important ones to know. So the G pen I think is in your actual pen settings, and the soft brush will be in, I think it's under airbrush.
Yeah, it's under
in
airbrush.
Clip Studio Paint. So I would suggest like getting to know those two brushes the most and also playing around with the opacity of them. And that's probably the most we're going to be like using them the most. So in Photoshop here, I'm just going to take the hard brush. We're going to just mess around. Let me do a black. We're going to mess around with the opacity here just to show like different ways we can layer the brushes. Also with a lower opacity, you can like layer different like almost like shadow effects on top of each other as well, which is really interesting. One of my personal tips for using the brushes though is using them with stabilization. And not everyone knows about this, so if you're a beginner, stabilization can be a really important thing to learn in your brushes. So in Photoshop, it should look something like this. It's called smoothing, and in Clip Studio Paint, it will be called stabilization. This should be like a setting underneath your actual brushes. And the importance of doing this is that, for example, you're starting out drawing and your lines might look a little bit shaky because you haven't practiced doing line work yet. And you don't know how to make your lines more smooth for like maybe line art or anything that you're working on. It's important to increase the stabilization of your brushes.
I did not realize that's what that did.
Yeah, it like improves how stable the brush actually is, which can be so handy when you're doing like line work and everything.
Or when you're disabled and have arthritic claws like me.
Definitely. So as we can see here, this is before stabilization, and then this is after, and we can see there's a slight difference in the line quality. So you're not like a bad artist, you just need to work with some stabilization.
There we go. That's it.
Yeah, and that can be really helpful when like drawing circles or shapes, and so many people don't know about stabilization, and it really helps when doing any line art. So yeah, we're just going to be playing around with some of the brushes, really getting to know the brushes. I would suggest these are the main two to be playing around with and like getting to know, and then you can kind of mess with the hardness and the opacity of brushes as well. And I suggest when you get any brush, you start kind of just messing around with it. Mess around with the opacity, with the flow, the stabilization. You should really be comfortable with how your brushes are working before you move into like doing a lot of art pieces with them. Just so you know what they're capable of and how to go about using them. So yeah.
Chaos. We have two clearly different approaches.
It's totally fine. It's important to be able to use your brushes and just like kind of go crazy with them, and maybe do a few squiggly lines. Know how they'll like work if you use them like with a really fast hand, or use them slowly when you're doing like line art. So it can be quite important to just test them out. So this is how I use brushes, and if you find that you really enjoy using brushes, you can use so many different ones. Let us know, and be sure to share the results with us.
Definitely. Use the hashtag SketchQuest. Well, for today, I've been Mashashi, and thank you, JLP, for coming and joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Always. We'll be back tomorrow for another quest. I hope you're already adventurers, because this is just the beginning. Until then, we'll see you later, taters. Bye!
Bye!